Jean Reyes stood frozen at checkout 4 in Morrison's grocery, staring at the infant formula she couldn't afford, $6 short, with her 18-month-old daughter Maya coughing weakly in her arms. Behind her, whispers cut through the fluorescent-lit silence. Judgments from strangers who'd already decided what kind of mother she was. And 4 people back in line, Ryan Stallman, a white millionaire in a tailored Navy suit, watched the scene unfold with his 7-year-old daughter Emma, his expression unreadable, his mind already calculating how to help. But what neither of them could possibly know was that this moment of public shame wasn't random at all, that their lives had been circling each other for years through invisible threads of tragedy, research, and fate. That this grocery store humiliation was actually the first visible knot in a pattern so impossible, so intricately woven, it would shatter everything they believed about help, pride, and whether some people are simply destined to collide. Before we dive deeper, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from today. And if you want more stories about dignity, unexpected redemption, and the moments that change everything, hit that subscribe button. The overhead lights in Morrison's grocery buzzed with that particular frequency that made everything feel slightly unreal, like the whole world was holding its breath. Jean Reyes stood at the front of checkout 4, her shoulders squared despite the exhaustion radiating from every inch of her body, her daughter Maya balanced on one hip. At 31 years old, Jean had learned to wear her composure like armor. 2 jobs, daycare custodian by day, nursing assistant 3 nights a week, and still the math never quite worked. Still, moments like this happened. Public, humiliating calculations where survival came down to loose change and prayer. Maya coughed again, that wet, rattling sound that had been getting worse all week, and Jean felt her chest tighten with a mother's instinct that something was deeply wrong. The cashier scanned the infamil gentlease, $23.47. Jean pulled crumpled bills from her jacket pocket for the 3rd time. 4 singles, 7 quarters, 3 dimes, 2 nickels, for pennies that looked like they'd survived a war. $17.29. The math didn't work. It never did. And somewhere behind her in line, Ryan Stallman watched a scene that would haunt him because he'd seen this before. In hospital rooms, in his late wife's eyes, in the impossible choice between love and money. He just didn't know yet that this woman, this child, this moment, they were all connected to him in ways that would take months to fully understand. What happened next would set everything in motion. The cashier's voice cut through Jean's mounting panic with professional detachment. $23.47. Jean's fingers trembled as she spread the crumpled bills across the counter one more time, as if arranging them differently might somehow change the total. 4 singles, 7 quarters, 3 dimes, 2 nickels, for pennies, $17.29. The same amount it had been the last 3 times she'd counted. "I'm sorry," Jean said quietly, her voice barely audible over the hum of refrigerator units and distant shopping cart wheels. "I thought I had enough. I'm short." The cashier, a middle-aged white woman with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun, allowed a small sigh. Her name tag read Patricia. "How much you got?" $17.29. Patricia's fingers flew across the register keys. "You're $6.18 short, honey." Maya coughed in Jean's arms, that wet, rattling sound that had been keeping Jean awake at night, and reached for the formula can with small, fevered fingers. Jean shifted her daughter's weight, feeling every ounce of the toddler's body pressing into her already aching side. She worked a double shift at the care home last night. Her body was running on 3 hours of sleep and determination. "I understand," Jean managed, her cheeks burning with shame. "I'll just put it back." Behind her, a voice pierced the air like broken glass. "Some people shouldn't have kids if they can't afford them." Jean's hand froze on the formula can. She recognized that particular brand of judgment, the kind that came from people who'd never counted pennies to survive, who'd never had to choose between medicine and rent, who'd never stood in a checkout line praying that maybe they'd miscounted and there'd be enough after all. Another voice joined in, slightly softer, but no less cutting. "That's what happens when you don't plan ahead. It's irresponsible." Jean forced herself to keep her eyes down, her fingers closing around the formula can. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She'd learned long ago that tears only made people more certain they were right about you. Keep your head down. Get through this moment. That was all she had to do. Excuse me. The voice came from somewhere behind her. A man's voice, quiet but carrying an undercurrent of authority that made heads turn. Jean looked up to see a white man in his late 30s stepping forward from 4 spots back in line. His navy suit probably cost more than Jean's monthly rent. A little blonde girl in a pink jacket held his hand, clutching a stuffed rabbit against her chest. "I'd like to cover the difference," he said, already reaching for his wallet. For one dangerous moment, hope flickered in Jean's chest. Then reality slammed down like a steel door. She'd been here before, different store, different stranger, same script. Well-meaning offers from people who saw her as a project, a good deed, a story they'd tell at dinner parties about the struggling, single mother they'd helped. "Thank you," Jean said carefully, her voice steady despite the emotion churning beneath the surface. "But no, I can't accept that." The man, Ryan, though she didn't know his name yet, looked genuinely confused. "It's just a few dollars. Please, let me help. I appreciate the offer." Jean's jaw tightened. She understood what he saw when he looked at her. Someone who needed saving. Someone who couldn't manage her own life. Someone who'd take his money and validate every assumption he'd ever made about people like her. "But I'll manage on my own." Patricia, the cashier, glanced between them, clearly uncomfortable with the standoff happening at a register. "Ma'am, if the gentleman wants to." I said no. Jean's voice was sharper now, embarrassment mixing with frustration and exhaustion and the particular fury that comes from being reduced to your circumstances. She pulled the formula can away from the counter completely. "I'm sorry for holding up the line." She turned, Maya still balanced on her hip, and walked away from the register with her head held high. Her legs felt like they might give out beneath her, but she kept moving, weaving through the aisles toward the exit. Behind her, she could hear the murmur of voices resuming, people already moving on to their own concerns, forgetting her the moment she was out of sight. Outside, the early evening air had turned cold. Jean stood under a flickering streetlight near the bus stop, rocking Maya gently as the toddler's coughs grew more frequent. She glanced down at her phone. The bus was running 23 minutes late. 23 minutes of standing in the cold with a sick baby and empty hands. "It's okay, baby girl," she whispered into Maya's curly hair, her voice cracking despite her best efforts. "We'll figure something out. We always do." Through the grocery store's glass doors, she could see the man in the navy suit at the register now, that little blonde girl standing patiently beside him. He glanced toward the exit once, his expression troubled, before turning back to his transaction. Jean looked away. She didn't need his pity. She didn't need anyone's pity. What she needed was a miracle, and those didn't come from strangers in expensive suits. They came from somewhere deeper, from her own strength, her own determination, her own refusal to break no matter how many times the world tried to bend her. The bus would come eventually. She'd get Maya home. She'd water down the last of their formula to make it stretch. And tomorrow, she'd figure out the next impossible thing. That's what mothers did. That's what she'd been doing since the day Marcus walked out and never looked back. She survived. 3 days after the grocery store incident, Jean reported for her morning shift at Bright Horizons Community Daycare with Maya in tow and hope running thinner than the watered-down formula she'd been stretching since Saturday. The daycare job didn't pay much, barely above minimum wage, but it came with one benefit that made it worth every exhausting hour: free childcare for Maya. Director Mrs. Chun had bent the rules to allow it, seeing something in Jean that reminded her of her own daughter's struggles years earlier. Jean would never take that kindness for granted. She arrived 15 minutes early every shift, stayed late without complaint, and made those floors shine like they'd never been touched by sticky fingers and spilled juice boxes. She was mopping the main hallway when she heard voices in the entrance area, Mrs. Chin's warm greeting mixing with a man's deeper tone. Jean kept her head down, focused on the rhythmic swish of the mop across linoleum. Parents came and went all day. This was no different. "This is a wonderful facility," the man was saying. "My daughter Emma has been asking for more friends her age, and your program came highly recommended." Jean's hand stilled on the mop handle. She knew that voice. "We're so grateful you're considering us, Mr. Stallman," Mrs. Chun replied, her voice carrying that particular brightness reserved for potential donors. "And I understand your technology company is interested in our STEM enrichment program." Jean looked up slowly, dread pooling in her stomach. There he was, the man from Morrison's grocery, now standing in the daycare entrance in khakis and a crisp white button-down, looking somehow even more out of place than he had in his navy suit. The little blonde girl, Emma, bounced excitedly beside him, already eyeing the colorful play area through the glass partition. Their eyes met across the hallway. Recognition flashed across his face, followed by something that looked like concern. Jean felt heat creep up her neck. Of all the daycares in the city, he had to choose this one. "Jean," Mrs. Chin called out, waving her over. "Come meet Mr. Stallman. He's enrolling his daughter Emma today." Jean wanted to disappear into the supply closet. Instead, she leaned the mop against the wall and approached, wiping her damp hands on her work pants. "Professional. Keep it professional. We've met," Ryan said quietly before Jean could speak. Briefly, Mrs. Chin's eyebrows rose with curiosity, but she was too polite to pry. "Well, wonderful. Jean is one of our hardest workers. She keeps this place running smoothly." "I'm sure she does," Ryan replied, his gaze still on Jean. There was an apology written in his eyes that she wasn't ready to accept. "Daddy, look." Emma had already spotted Maya playing with blocks in the toddler area visible through the partition. Without waiting for permission, she rushed toward the glass, pressing her palms against it. "That little girl is so cute. Can I go play?" Maya looked up at the commotion, her curls bouncing as she tilted her head. Despite everything, the lingering cough, the fever that had barely broken, she smiled shyly at the older girl making faces through the glass. "Let's get you enrolled first, sweetheart," Ryan said gently, but Emma was already tugging on his sleeve. "Please, Daddy. She looks lonely." Mrs. Chun smiled. "Actually, why don't we let Emma meet some of the children while we handle the paperwork? Jean, would you mind showing Emma to the play area?" Jean wanted to refuse, but Mrs. Chin's expectant expression left no room for excuses. Of course. She led Emma through the partition door, hyper-aware of Ryan's gaze following them. The moment they entered the play space, Emma made a beeline for Maya, dropping to her knees beside the block tower with the unself-conscious confidence of a child who'd never learned to fear strangers. "Hi," Emma announced brightly. "I'm Emma. What's your name?" Maya looked to Jean for permission. Jean nodded, her chest tight with a complicated mixture of protectiveness and something else she couldn't quite name. "Maya," her daughter whispered. "Maya," Emma repeated, as if testing the sound. "That's a really pretty name. Want to build towers with me? I'm really good at towers." Within moments, they were laughing together as blocks tumbled and crashed, Emma's rabbit puppet joining the construction efforts with solemn dedication. Maya's face lit up in a way Jean hadn't seen in weeks. Pure childhood joy, uncomplicated by medical bills and empty formula cans. Jean watched from a few feet away, arms crossed, trying to ignore the tightness in her throat. Maya so rarely got to just be a carefree child. Most days were colored by doctor visits she couldn't afford, medicine schedules Jean couldn't maintain, and a mother's constant worry that permeated everything. "She's beautiful," Jean startled. Ryan had finished with paperwork faster than expected and stood beside her now, maintaining a respectful distance, but close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and cedar-scented. "Thank you," Jean said stiffly, not looking at him. "Look, about the grocery store. You don't need to explain." "I want to." Ryan's voice was quiet, earnest. "I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I just saw someone struggling and thought. You thought you'd fix it." Jean finally turned to face him, keeping her voice low enough that the children wouldn't hear. "You saw a problem and decided money was the solution. But you didn't see me. You didn't see a person trying to maintain her dignity in an impossible situation. You just saw someone who needed saving." Ryan absorbed her words, his expression shifting from defensive to thoughtful. "You're right. I'm sorry." The simple acknowledgement surprised her. Most people in his position doubled down, got defensive, made it about their good intentions rather than her experience. "Thank you for saying that," Jean said after a pause. They stood in silence, watching their daughters build elaborate block cities and negotiate complex pretend scenarios with the seriousness of architects planning cities. Emma declared Maya her best friend within 5 minutes. Maya, usually so shy with strangers, was giggling openly. "They really hit it off," Ryan observed. "Maya doesn't usually warm up to people this quickly," Jean admitted. "Your daughter must have a gift." Emma's always been like that. Open heart, no fear. Pride softened his features. "Sometimes I wish I could see the world the way she does." Before Jean could respond, Emma called out, "Daddy, Miss Jean, come see our tower. It's taller than me." They moved closer, appropriately praised the architectural achievement, and watched it immediately topple to renewed giggles. As Emma and Maya began reconstruction efforts, Ryan spoke again. "I know you don't want my help, but if there's ever anything you need, anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask." Jean almost smiled at that, as if she would ever ask him for anything. But something about his obvious sincerity made her reconsider her initial assessment. Maybe he was just a wealthy person trying to buy a clear conscience. Or maybe he actually cared about more than just writing checks to feel good about himself. "Actually," Jean said slowly, surprising herself, "there is something. The playground outside. The swings have been broken for months. The kids miss them." Ryan looked genuinely pleased that she'd asked for something, even if it wasn't for herself. "Consider done. I'll have someone out here this week." Ryan arrived at Bright Horizons the following Friday wearing jeans and a t-shirt, a toolbox in hand. Jean spotted him through the window as she wiped down tables in the main playroom, and confusion flickered across her face. She'd assumed he'd send a crew to fix the swings. Wealthy people didn't do manual labor themselves. But there he was, kneeling beside the broken swing set, testing chains and inspecting rusted bolts with the focused attention of someone who actually knew what he was doing. For the next 3 hours, Ryan worked. He replaced corroded hardware, reinforced the frame, and even repainted sections that had started to chip. Jean found excuses to walk past the windows, watching him work with a growing sense of disbelief. His shirt grew damp with sweat. His hand got dirty. He didn't check his phone once. When the children were released for outdoor play, their shrieks of joy made all his effort worthwhile. Ryan tested each swing personally, his tall frame looking almost comical on the child-sized seats, making sure they'd hold weight properly before declaring them safe. Jean found herself walking outside, approaching him as he packed up his tools. "You didn't have to do this yourself." He looked up, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "I know, but I wanted to. Sometimes it's important to do things with your own hands instead of just paying someone else to do them." "Well, thank you." "The kids are thrilled." "Good. That's what matters." He stood, shouldering his toolbox. "How's Maya doing?" She seemed a bit under the weather earlier this week. The question was casual, but something in his tone made Jean's defenses rise. "She's managing. We have a doctor's appointment next week." Ryan nodded, and Jean could see him biting back questions he wanted to ask, but knew better than to voice. She appreciated his restraint, even as part of her wished she could tell someone just how scared she really was about Maya's worsening symptoms. That night, after Emma fell asleep clutching her stuffed rabbit, Ryan sat in his home office, unable to shake the image of Maya's labored breathing when she'd run to greet Emma that afternoon. The cough, the slight wheeze, the way Jean's face had tightened with worry when she thought no one was watching. He told himself not to interfere. Jean had made her boundaries clear. But concern gnawed at him, mixing with memories of Sophia's early symptoms. The cough that wouldn't quit, the unexplained fevers, the gradual weakening that doctors initially dismissed as normal childhood illness. Almost without conscious decision, Ryan opened his laptop and typed in the search bar, "Jean Reyes GoFundMe." The page loaded, and his breath caught. There was Maya's photo, much younger, maybe 8 months old, lying in a hospital bed with tubes and wires. Jean sat beside her, one hand on her daughter's chest, her expression a mixture of fierce love and devastating fear. "Help save Maya Reyes," the headline read. Below it, Jean's words explained everything Ryan had sensed but couldn't name. Maya was diagnosed at 8 months with systemic juvenile idiopathic arthritis, a rare autoimmune disorder that causes her immune system to attack her own organs. Without treatment, the inflammation will damage her heart, lungs, and other vital organs. She needs specialized biologic medications that cost $80,000 per year. Treatment our insurance won't cover, and I can't afford on my own. Ryan's hands trembled on the keyboard. SJIA. Systemic juvenile idiopathic arthritis. The exact same disease that had killed Sophia. He scrolled through the updates Jean had posted over months. Small victories and devastating setbacks. Hope and desperation in equal measure. The fundraiser goal was $80,000. Amount raised, $1,347. Flashbacks hit him in waves. Sophia's diagnosis. The specialist's grim prognosis. The experimental treatments that failed. The final months when she could barely breathe without assistance. Emma asking when Mommy would come home from the hospital. The funeral in the rain. He'd had unlimited money. Access to the best doctors in the world. Every possible advantage. And Sophia had died anyway at 32, leaving Emma without a mother and Ryan drowning in guilt that all his wealth couldn't save the woman he loved. But this was different. Maya was still fighting. She still had time. The biologics that hadn't existed when Sophia was first diagnosed were available now, if Jean could afford them. Ryan stared at the fundraiser page, his mind racing. He could solve this problem with a single transfer. $80,000 was nothing to him. What he spent on the company holiday party, what he paid in property taxes on his penthouse. He could save Maya's life with the financial equivalent of a rounding error in his annual budget. But Jean would refuse. She'd made that abundantly clear. Her pride wasn't just stubbornness. It was survival, protection against a world that constantly tried to diminish her. An idea formed, risky but potentially workable. Anonymous donation. Jean couldn't refuse what she didn't know about. He'd used one of his shell companies, Clearwater Medical Trust, established years ago for exactly this kind of discreet philanthropy. The money would simply appear in her account, enough to reach her goal. No credit to him, no obligation she'd feel compelled to reject. Ryan pulled up his banking interface, his cursor hovering over the transfer button. Marcus Webb's warning echoed in his mind. Unsolicited financial gifts to strangers can create legal complications. But this wasn't a gift to a stranger. This was saving a child's life. This was preventing another Emma from losing her mother, or in Maya's case, another child from being lost herself. This was making Sophia's suffering mean something. He typed in the amount, $78,653. Exactly enough to reach the goal organically. Not so round it looked suspicious. His finger hovered over the confirm button. Jean would be furious if she ever found out, but she'd also have the means to save her daughter. Wasn't that worth her anger? Ryan clicked confirm before he could second-guess himself. The transfer processed instantly. Within minutes, Jean's GoFundMe account would show the full $80,000 needed for Maya's treatment. He closed the laptop, a strange mixture of satisfaction and dread settling in his chest. He'd done the right thing. He was certain of it. He just hoped Jean would see it that way. Across town, Jean's phone buzzed on the nightstand beside her mattress on the floor. She'd finally got Maya to sleep after another coughing fit, and exhaustion was pulling her under. She almost ignored it, but something made her reach for the phone. The screen showed dozens of notifications, emails, texts, GoFundMe alerts. Her heart stuttered. With shaking hands, she opened the fundraiser app. The number at the top made her gasp aloud. $80,000 goal reached. She stared in disbelief at the massive donation listed. Clearwater Medical Trust, $78,653. For one dangerous, beautiful moment, Jean let herself believe in miracles. Then reality intruded, cold and suspicious. This couldn't be real. Large anonymous donations were usually scams. She'd read about it happening to other desperate parents. Or worse, this was some kind of mistake that would be reversed, leaving her with false hope. Her hands shook as she called the GoFundMe helpline, waiting through automated menus until a human voice answered. I need to verify a large donation to my account, Jean said, her voice tight. Is it legitimate? The representative put her on hold. Minutes crawled by. Maya coughed in her sleep, and Jean's free hand instinctively moved to her daughter's back. Ms. Reyes, the representative returned. I'm showing that donation as flagged for review. Large anonymous contributions often trigger our fraud protection protocols. Your account has been temporarily frozen pending investigation. The miracle shattered. Frozen? But my daughter needs treatment now. I understand your frustration, ma'am, but this is for your protection. We'll resolve this as quickly as possible, typically within 2 to 4 weeks. 2 to 4 weeks. Jean's voice cracked. My daughter could die in 2 to 4 weeks. But the representative could only apologize and repeat policy. Jean hung up, staring at the frozen account, at the money that might as well have been on Mars for all the good it did her. Then, with growing suspicion, she pulled up the browser on her phone and searched Clearwater Medical Trust. No website, no records, nothing. She tried another angle, calling her friend Keisha, who worked in banking. 20 minutes of digging later, Keisha called back with an answer Jean had already started to suspect. Girl, Clearwater Medical Trust is a subsidiary of Stallman Technologies. It's a shell company, probably used for tax-deductible donations. Jean's blood turned to ice. Ryan had done this. Rage flooded through her. Not the hot, explosive kind, but cold and calculating. He'd promised to respect her boundaries. He'd looked her in the eye and agreed not to make decisions for her. And then he'd done exactly that, destroying her one shot at saving Maya in the process. She looked at her sleeping daughter, at the phone showing $80,000 she couldn't access, at the ceiling with its water stains marking years of neglect. Then Jean stood, grabbed her jacket, and headed for the door. Mrs. Rodriguez next door would watch Maya for an hour, because Jean was going downtown to Ryan Stallman's office, and this time he was going to hear exactly what his charity had cost her. Jean had never been inside a building like Stallman Technologies before, all glass and steel and marble, the kind of place where even the air felt expensive. Security tried to stop her at the entrance. A broad-shouldered man in a crisp uniform who looked at her worn jacket and cleaning service wear pants with barely concealed skepticism. I need to see Ryan Stallman. Now, do you have an appointment, ma'am? Tell him Jean Reyes is here. Her voice was deadly calm, the kind of calm that comes right before a storm breaks. Trust me, he'll want to see me. Something in her tone must have convinced him, because he made the call. 2 minutes later, Jean was being escorted to an elevator that required a key card to access the executive floors. With each floor they climbed, her anger built like pressure behind a dam. The elevator opened directly into a reception area where Ryan's assistant sat behind a sleek desk. Ms. Reyes, Mr. Stallman is in a meeting. Jean walked past her without breaking stride. Through the glass walls of the conference room, she could see Ryan at the head of a table surrounded by executives in expensive suits. She pushed the door open, and every head turned toward her. Jean! Ryan stood, shock and concern warring on his face. What's wrong? She threw her phone on the polished conference table. The screen showed her frozen GoFundMe account. This is what's wrong. You froze my daughter's medical fund. Ryan's face went pale. Everyone out. Now. The executives scrambled to leave, gathering laptops and papers, pointedly not making eye contact with Jean as they filed past. The door clicked shut, leaving them alone in the glass box where anyone on the floor could see but not hear. I didn't know it would trigger a fraud alert, Ryan started. Of course you didn't know. Jean's voice shook with fury. Because you've never been poor. You've never had to navigate a system designed to distrust you at every turn. You just decided, all by yourself, what was best for me and my daughter without asking, without thinking about consequences. I was trying to help. You were trying to fix a problem. She moved closer, her finger jabbing the air between them. You saw a struggling single mother and thought, oh, I'll just throw money at this and it'll go away. But I'm not a problem to be solved, Ryan. I'm a human being with agency and dignity. And when you make decisions for me, even with good intentions, you take that away. Ryan sank into his chair, looking genuinely devastated. I'm sorry. I truly am. Do you know what I did this morning? Jean's voice cracked. I called Maya's specialist. I scheduled her first treatment. I told her the medicine was finally coming. And then she had to stop, compose herself. Then the doctor's office called back. Said the funds were frozen, being investigated for fraud. They canceled her appointment. And Maya asked me, Mama, am I going to get better? What was I supposed to tell her? The silence between them was suffocating. Ryan's hands gripped the edge of the conference table, his knuckles white. My wife had the same disease, he said quietly. Jean stopped cold. What? Sophia. She died 5 years ago when Emma was 2. SJA. It started exactly like Maya's symptoms, the cough, the fevers. By the end, his voice broke. By the end, she couldn't breathe without a machine. I had every resource in the world. Best specialists, experimental treatments, unlimited money. None of it mattered. She died anyway. Jean felt her anger waver, replaced by something more complicated. Sympathy mixed with frustration, understanding mixed with hurt. When I saw Maya, heard that cough, Ryan continued, I recognized it immediately. And I thought maybe I could do for your daughter what I couldn't do for my wife. Maybe Sophia's suffering could mean something. I'm sorry about your wife, Jean said, softer now but still firm. I truly am. But you can't project your grief onto my situation. Maya isn't Sophia, and I'm not you. I don't have the luxury of throwing money at problems and hoping they disappear. You're absolutely right. I overstepped. Ryan met her eyes. But please, let me fix this. Let me make it right. Ow. The word came out almost as a challenge. My legal team will contact GoFundMe today. We'll provide documentation proving the donation's legitimacy. The account will be unfrozen within 48 hours. He leaned forward, but we'll restructure it properly this time. A formal medical loan with clear legal terms. 0% interest. Repayment only when you're financially stable. You maintain full control over Maya's care. Everything documented, everything official. And what do you get out of this? Jean's voice was heavy with suspicion. Peace of mind that I didn't make things worse. And maybe, he hesitated. Maybe the chance to turn Sophia's death into something that saves lives instead of just ending hers. Jean studied his face, searching for condescension or pity. She found only sincerity and bone-deep regret. No more surprises, she said finally. Ever. If you want to help, you ask first. Every single time. Agreed. I maintain full decision-making about Maya's care and my life. Absolutely. This is a business transaction with clear boundaries. We're not friends. We're not charity case and donor. We're professional acquaintances whose daughters happen to be friends. Understood. Ryan extended his hand across the table. Do we have an agreement? Jean looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away, to refuse on principle, to maintain the independence she'd fought so hard to preserve. But Maya's face floated in her mind, fevered, coughing, asking when she'd feel better. Pride couldn't save her daughter. But maybe, with very clear boundaries, this could. Jean shook his hand. We have an agreement. As she turned to leave, Ryan called after her. Jean, thank you for coming here, for telling me the truth instead of just walking away. That took courage. She paused at the door. And Ryan, thank you for listening. Most people don't. The elevator doors closed on his expression, relief mixed with determination. Jean leaned against the wall as the elevator descended, exhaustion and hope warring in her chest. She'd reclaimed her power, set her terms, maintained her dignity. Now she just had to hope this fragile agreement would hold long enough to save Maya's life. 6 weeks passed, and Maya's transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The biologic treatments were working better than anyone had dared hope. Her cough diminished to nothing. Her energy returned in bursts of toddler enthusiasm that left Jean simultaneously exhausted and grateful beyond words. The fever broke and stayed gone. At daycare, Maya and Emma were inseparable. They'd built their own world of elaborate pretend games, princesses and astronauts and veterinarians saving stuffed animals. Emma called Maya my little sister with such conviction that even the other children accepted it as fact. Jean found herself softening toward Ryan despite her best efforts to maintain professional distance. He picked Emma up regularly now, and their conversations at pickup had evolved beyond polite small talk. He asked about Maya's progress with genuine interest. She asked about Emma's adjustment to the new school. They weren't friends exactly, but something like mutual respect had taken root. Then came Emma's 8th birthday party. Ryan had kept it relatively modest by his standards, just Emma's classmates and a few daycare friends, including Maya. His penthouse was tasteful rather than ostentatious, but Jean still felt the wealth gap like a physical presence as she walked through the door. The other parents mingled with champagne glasses and easy laughter, discussing vacation homes and private schools. Jean stood near the window, watching Maya and Emma spin in matching princess dresses, when another mother approached. The woman's smile was sharp around the edges. "So you're Emma's friend's mother?" The way she said friend carried weight. "How did you meet Ryan?" "Our daughters go to the same daycare," Jean replied evenly. "Oh." The woman's eyebrows rose with pointed interest. "You work there?" "I do." "How nice." The pause before nice said everything her polite tone tried to hide. Jean excused herself and stepped onto the balcony, needing air. The city sprawled below, lights beginning to twinkle as dusk settled. She heard the door open behind her. "You okay?" Ryan's voice was gentle. "I'm fine. Your friends are interesting. They're not my friends. They're Emma's classmates' parents." He moved to stand beside her, careful to maintain respectful distance. "There's a difference." Jean managed a small smile. "Fair enough. For what it's worth," Ryan said quietly, "you have more grace in your little finger than most of them have in their whole bodies." Before Jean could respond, a flash caught her peripheral vision. She turned to see a man across the street with a camera, the telephoto lens pointed directly at them. Ryan. But he'd already seen it. His expression darkened. "Paparazzi. They show up sometimes. Ignore him." Jean tried to, but as they stood there talking about Maya's latest treatment results, she couldn't shake the feeling that the photograph would somehow matter. That this innocent moment, Ryan leaning close to hear her over traffic noise, her gesturing as she explained the doctor's optimism, would be framed as something it wasn't. She was right. 48 hours later, her phone exploded with notifications. A local entertainment blog had posted the photo under the headline, "Tech Millionaire's Mystery Woman." By afternoon, tabloids had picked it up. By evening, someone had identified Jean from the daycare. The second wave of headlines was worse. "Single mom, custodian, Stallman's new love interest." Some articles were sympathetic, painting it as a modern fairy tale. Others were cruel, dissecting her finances, her divorce from Marcus, her convenient proximity to a wealthy widower. The racist dog whistles were subtle but present, coded language about inappropriate relationships and questionable motivations. Jean first noticed a shift at daycare Monday morning. Parents who'd previously smiled politely now whispered and stared. One mother pulled her daughter away from Maya with a curt "Come here, sweetie." "Is there a problem?" Jean asked, keeping her voice level. The woman's smile was ice. "I just think it's best if our kids play separately." By Tuesday, Director Chun called Jean into her office. The older woman looked uncomfortable, her usual warmth dimmed by institutional pressure. "The board has concerns," she said carefully, "about the publicity affecting the center's reputation." Jean's stomach dropped. "I haven't done anything wrong. There's no relationship beyond our daughters being friends." "I believe you, Jean. But the board..." Mrs. Chen's voice was genuinely apologetic. "They're worried about perception, about how this looks to other parents." "So you're firing me?" 2 weeks severance. "I fought for you, but it wasn't enough." Jean stood, her legs somehow steady despite the floor tilting beneath her. "I understand. Thank you for trying." She collected Maya, walked out of the building, and didn't let herself cry until they were on the bus. Maya, confused by her mother's tears, patted Jean's face with small hands. "Mama's sad." "Mama's okay, baby. Just tired." Wednesday brought worse news. Her landlord, Mr. Hayes, a perpetually suspicious man who'd never liked having Section 8 tenants, appeared at her door with a new lease. "Rent's doubling next month." All this media attention, reporters might start coming around. I gotta protect my other tenants. You can't just double my rent. Month-to-month lease, Ms. Reyes. 30 days notice. It's legal. His smile was predatory. Take it or leave it. Jean took the paper with shaking hands. Double rent meant eviction in everything but name. She couldn't afford even her current rate on one salary, let alone doubled. Thursday, the knock came. Two women in business attire, their expressions professionally neutral. Ms. Reyes? I'm Janet Foster with Child Protective Services. We received an anonymous report regarding your daughter's living conditions and welfare. The world tilted sideways. Jean let them in because refusing would only make things worse. They documented everything. The water-stained ceiling, the minimal furniture, the small space that was all she could afford. They asked invasive questions about her employment status, her relationship with Ryan, whether she could provide adequate nutrition. They examined Maya, who was confused and frightened by strangers poking and prodding. Jean held her daughter afterward, feeling her shake with residual fear. Ms. Reyes, Foster said as they prepared to leave, this residence has code violations. You have 14 days to remedy them, or we'll need to discuss alternative placement for Maya. Alternative placement, the euphemism for taking her daughter away. After they left, Jean sat on the floor with Maya in her lap, staring at nothing. No job, rent doubling, CPS investigation. Everything she'd built, everything she'd fought for, crumbling. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against her better judgment, she opened it. I warned you. Stay away from him, or you'll lose everything that matters. Jean looked out the window. A black SUV sat across the street, engine running. The headlights flickered once, a deliberate signal. Someone was watching. Someone wanted her afraid. It was working. She held Maya tighter, feeling her daughter's heartbeat against her chest, and finally let herself break. Silent tears streamed down her face as Maya fell asleep, oblivious to the fact that her mother's world was disintegrating. Jean had always survived, always found a way forward. But tonight, for the first time, she couldn't see the path anymore. Jean stood in the fluorescent glare of Miller's pawn shop, clutching a small velvet box in her trembling hands. The shop smelled of desperation and old metal, scent she'd never wanted to become familiar with. Behind the bulletproof glass, a heavy-set man with tired eyes waited with professional detachment. She opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band with a small diamond, nothing extravagant. Her grandmother's ring, passed down through 3 generations. Abuela's voice echoed in her memory. Mija, this ring survived revolution, immigration, poverty. It represents our strength. I can give you 800, the pawnbroker said without emotion. It's worth more than that. Jean's voice was barely a whisper. Maybe to you, but this is what I can sell it for. Take it or leave it. $800 wouldn't fix anything. Wouldn't cover doubled rent. Wouldn't replace her lost income. Wouldn't remedy code violations CPS had documented. But it would buy formula, diapers, a few weeks of breathing room while she figured out the next impossible thing. I'll take it. The cash felt obscene in her hands. Crumpled bills that couldn't begin to match what she'd just lost. Jean left the pawn shop with empty fingers and a hole in her chest, feeling like she'd betrayed every woman who'd worn that ring before her. I'm sorry, Abuela, she whispered to no one. I'm so sorry. What Jean didn't see was the man across the street with a camera, capturing her tear-streaked face as she emerged. Lauren Mitchell's hired paparazzo had been following her for days, waiting for the perfect shot. A grieving woman leaving a pawn shop was gold for the narrative Lauren was building. By Friday morning, new headlines appeared. Stallman's mystery woman pawns jewelry, gifts from millionaire boyfriend. The article speculated that Jean had been selling expensive gifts Ryan had given her, painting her as a gold digger, squeezing him for money, then liquidating the evidence. None of it was true, but truth didn't matter anymore. Ryan saw the headlines before his morning coffee. Rage detonated in his chest. Not at Jean, but at whoever was systematically destroying her life. This wasn't random media attention. Someone was orchestrating this, feeding stories, manipulating narratives. He grabbed his jacket and keys. Cancel my morning meetings, he told his assistant. I have something urgent to handle. But before he could leave, his head of security, Daniel Ross, appeared in his doorway with a grim expression. Mr. Stallman, we need to talk about Ms. Reyes. Someone's been following her. Professional surveillance. Ryan's blood ran cold. Show me. Daniel pulled up photos on his tablet. Jean at the grocery store, at the bus stop, leaving the daycare with Maya. Always the same black SUV in the background. License plate traced to a rental company, paid for by a law firm, Mitchell and Associates. Lauren, Ryan said, the name bitter on his tongue. His ex-girlfriend. The corporate attorney who'd never accepted their breakup 18 months ago. She had the resources, the connections, and the vindictive streak to orchestrate everything. The leaked photos, the anonymous CPS report, the threatening texts. I need everything you can find on her, Ryan told Daniel. Everything. Across town, Jean faced a different crisis. Maya's fever had spiked suddenly, a complication from the treatment. She'd rushed to the emergency room, but without her daycare job, she'd lost the minimal health insurance it provided. She needs emergency for steroids, the doctor explained. For $1,500 without insurance. I don't have that. Jean's voice was hollow. She'd already spent most of the pawn shop money on rent. We can set up a payment plan, but just do it. Save her. Jean would figure out the debt later. She always did. She sat in the waiting room. Maya whisked away to a treatment room and felt herself fracturing. Every system she'd built to survive was collapsing. Every wall she'd erected to protect herself was crumbling. Her phone buzzed. A package delivery notification. Mrs. Rodriguez had signed for something at her apartment. Jean barely registered it until later, when she returned home with Maya sleeping fitfully in her arms. The package sat on her doorstep, a large envelope with careful child's handwriting on the front. Inside was a crayon drawing. Two families holding hands, stick figures labeled Emma, Daddy, Maya, and Miss Jean. Above them, in Emma's careful letters, were the same. I love you. Attached was a note in Ryan's handwriting. Lily dictated this. She wanted you to know she misses Maya. We both do. Jean stared at the drawing through blurring tears. She'd been so focused on maintaining her independence, on refusing to be anyone's charity case, that she'd forgotten something fundamental. Connection wasn't weakness. Asking for help wasn't surrender. Maya stirred in her arms, murmuring Emma in her sleep. With shaking hands, Jean picked up her phone. She'd ignored Ryan's calls and texts for days, determined to handle everything alone. But alone was killing her. Alone was destroying everything she'd fought to build. She pressed dial before she could stop herself. Jean. Ryan answered on the first ring, relief evident in his voice. Are you okay? No. The word came out broken. It's not okay. Nothing's okay. What happened? Maya's in the ER. I lost my job. CPS is investigating me. Someone's stalking me. I sold my grandmother's ring, and it wasn't even enough. Her voice cracked completely. I can't do this alone anymore. I can't. What hospital? Ryan, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm telling you. His voice was firm but gentle. What hospital? Mercy General. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Jean hung up, staring at Emma's drawing of their two families connected. She'd spent so long protecting her dignity, refusing help, maintaining boundaries. But maybe dignity wasn't about doing everything alone. Maybe it was about knowing when to let people stand beside you instead of above you. Maybe asking for help, real help, with clear boundaries and mutual respect, was its own kind of strength. She held Maya closer, kissed her fevered forehead, and waited. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't waiting alone. Outside, the black SUV idled across the street, its occupant making notes. Laura Mitchell's private investigator documented everything. The hospital visit, Ryan's Mercedes pulling into the parking lot, the reunion in the waiting room. Evidence, Lauren called it. Proof that Jean Reyes was manipulating Ryan Stallman. But what the investigator couldn't photograph was the shift happening inside that hospital. The moment when two people stopped being charity case and donor and started becoming something else entirely. Partners, allies, two parents fighting for their daughters against systems designed to break them. The storm had pushed Jean to her breaking point. But sometimes, breaking open was the only way to let the light in. Ryan arrived at Mercy General with Emma in tow, finding Jean in the waiting room, hollow-eyed and trembling. He didn't speak, just sat beside her. Emma climbed into Jean's lap without hesitation, wrapping small arms around her neck. "Miss Jean, Maya's going to be okay. My daddy fixes things." Jean held Emma and cried, deep, shaking sobs she'd been holding back for weeks. Ryan sat quietly, his presence steady rather than overwhelming, until Jean could breathe again. "Tell me everything," he said finally. Jean explained it all: the job loss, the doubled rent, the CPS investigation, the threatening texts, the black SUV watching her apartment. Ryan's jaw clenched tighter with each revelation. "Someone's targeting you deliberately," he said. "My security team traced the surveillance. It's my ex-girlfriend, Lauren. She's been orchestrating all of this." "What?" Jean's voice was raw. "I've never even met her. Because she sees you as competition. Because she's never accepted that we're over." Ryan's expression darkened with anger at himself. "This is my fault. My past destroying your present." Before Jean could respond, a nurse appeared. "Ms. Reyes? Maya's stable. The treatment is working. She can go home in the morning." Relief flooded them both. In that moment of shared gratitude, something shifted, a recognition that they were no longer strangers navigating an awkward arrangement, but two parents united in protecting their children. "There's something else," Ryan said quietly after the nurse left. "Something I discovered that you need to know." He pulled out his phone and showed her a document. A scholarship award letter from 8 years ago. Stallman Tech Foundation. Recipient, Jean Reyes. Amount, $25,000 for nursing school. Jean stared at the screen, her mind struggling to process. "You funded my nursing school? My foundation did. I didn't know it was you specifically until a letter was mis-delivered to my office last week." His voice was thick with emotion. "We were connected years before we ever met, Jean. I helped you without knowing, and now you're here, and our daughters. It can't be coincidence." Jean's hands trembled as she held the phone. "It's too much. There's more." Ryan pulled up another document, medical research files. "When Sophia was dying, I funded experimental treatment trials. They failed to save her, but the data from those trials." He met Jean's eyes. "That research directly led to the biologics that are saving Maya's life right now. Sophia's suffering created the treatment protocol your daughter is receiving." Jean couldn't speak. The impossibility of it, the threads weaving their lives together across years and tragedy, was overwhelming. "Your wife's death is saving my daughter," she whispered finally. "Yes, everything's connected. The scholarship, the research, our daughter's meeting, it's all woven together." Ryan's voice cracked. "I don't believe in fate, but I don't know how else to explain this." They sat in silence, both overwhelmed by the cosmic weight of their intertwined histories. Emma had fallen asleep against Jean's shoulder, breathing softly. "I need to tell you something, too," Jean said quietly. "The ring I pawned, it wasn't from you. It was my grandmother's. The only thing I had left of her." Ryan's expression shifted to devastation. "Jean, I did what I had to do, but I've been fighting so hard to maintain my independence that I forgot something important." She looked at him directly. "I forgot that accepting help from people who genuinely care isn't weakness. It's just being human." "I'll get your ring back," Ryan said immediately. "Which pawn shop?" "Miller's on 5th Street. "But Ryan..." "Consider it done." He pulled out his phone, already texting his assistant. Jean wanted to protest, but Emma stirred in her arms, and Maya was stabled down the hall, and someone had been systematically trying to destroy her life. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. "Thank you," she said simply. Ryan nodded. "Now let me handle Lauren. She's crossed every line, and it ends today. What are you going to do?" His expression was cold steel. "Whatever it takes to protect you and Maya. I failed to protect Sophia. I won't fail again." Jean recognized the determination in his voice, the same fierce protectiveness she felt for Maya. They weren't so different after all, she realized. Just two people who'd lost everything trying desperately to save what remained. "We do this together," Jean said firmly. Not you saving me. Us protecting our daughters. Partners. Ryan extended his hand. Partners. Jean shook it, feeling the shift between them solidify into something stronger than charity or obligation. This was alliance. This was family, not by blood or romance, but by choice and shared purpose. Outside, the investigator's camera captured them through the hospital window, two figures silhouetted against harsh fluorescent light, hands clasped in agreement. Lauren would see it as confirmation of her suspicions, but she had no idea what was coming for her. Ryan's legal team worked with surgical precision. Within 72 hours, they'd assembled a comprehensive case against Lauren Mitchell that would destroy her career and potentially put her behind bars. Daniel Ross laid it out in Ryan's office. Bank records showing payments to the paparazzo and private investigator. Phone records connecting Lauren to the tabloid that published the pawn shop story. Emails discussing Jean specifically. And a smoking gun. Evidence that Lauren had embezzled from charity clients over the past 5 years, including medical research funds earmarked for the hospital treating Maya. She's been stealing from sick children, Daniel said grimly, to fund her lifestyle and her vendetta against Ms. Reyes. Ryan called Lauren's office, his voice ice cold. We need to meet. Now. An hour later, Lauren sat across from him in a conference room, her lawyer beside her, confidence wavering as Ryan slid a folder across the table. You have 24 hours to turn yourself in voluntarily, Ryan said. Harassment, stalking, filing false CPS reports, embezzlement. Or I release everything to the authorities and the media. Your choice. Lauren's mask cracked. You're choosing her over me? That woman with her sick kid? That woman has more integrity than you'll ever understand. Ryan leaned forward. You tried to destroy an innocent mother because you couldn't accept that I moved on. You weaponized the system against someone who was already struggling. You stole from dying children. You're done, Lauren. Her lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. Lauren's face drained of color as she read through the evidence. You're bluffing, she tried weakly. Am I? Ryan stood. 24 hours. After that, I show no mercy. Lauren tried to flee to the Cayman Islands that night. Airport security arrested her before she could board. The charges were extensive: harassment, stalking, filing false reports, embezzlement of over $300,000 from charitable trusts. The media coverage was immediate. Prominent attorney arrested in stalking case ran across every outlet. Within hours, the CPS investigation of Jean was dropped and her record cleared. The narrative shifted completely. Jean wasn't a gold digger. She was a victim of a vindictive woman's jealous obsession. But Ryan wasn't satisfied with just legal justice. He wanted to transform this nightmare into something meaningful. He scheduled a press conference at Children's Hospital, Jean standing beside him despite her nervousness. The room was packed with reporters, cameras, and curious donors. Over the past weeks, there's been intense speculation about my relationship with Jean Reyes, Ryan began. I'm here to set the record straight. Ms. Reyes is the mother of a child with the same autoimmune disorder that took my late wife. Through my foundation, I established a medical grant to help cover treatment costs. That's the truth. He paused, letting that sink in. But the tabloid coverage had devastating consequences. Ms. Reyes lost her job, faced housing insecurity, and was subjected to a baseless CPS investigation, all because she accepted help for her dying daughter. The person responsible has been arrested, but the damage reveals a bigger problem. We live in a society that judges parents by their bank accounts rather than their love and effort. Ryan gestured to Jean. This woman works multiple jobs, advocates fiercely for her child, and faces impossible odds with dignity. She doesn't need saving. She needs support. She needs a system that doesn't force parents to choose between their child's life and financial survival. Jean stepped to the microphone, her voice steady despite her racing heart. 8 months ago, I stood in a grocery store, $6 short for my daughter's formula. I thought that moment defined my failure as a mother. But I was wrong. That moment didn't define me. How I fought afterward did. I learned that accepting help doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Her voice strengthened. We're not meant to survive alone. We're meant to hold each other up when life becomes unbearable. That's what this foundation does, Not charity, but partnership. Not pity, but dignity. The applause was thunderous. #RespectGean trended worldwide within hours. Donations flooded in from people who understood struggle, who'd faced their own impossible choices. Ryan announced the Maya and Emma Foundation with a $75 million endowment, offering Jean the position of Community Outreach Director. The families we serve need someone who understands their struggles through lived experience, Ryan said. There's no one more qualified than Jean Reyes. Jean accepted, tears streaming down her face, as Maya and Emma watched from the front row, holding hands and grinning. Justice had been served, but more importantly, tragedy was being transformed into legacy.